Congratulations, you've made it to the final lecture in Biology 182. I hope that you've enjoyed the adventure. I hope you've grown as scientists. This is Professor Jared Rathel, and today is the most important lecture of the semester. Here, we're going to think about global ecology, specifically biodiversity, the myriad of other life forms that share this planet with us. Life forms that have just as much right to be here as we do, and the difficult fight to preserve as many of them as we can. Today, we're going to explore the nascent science of conservation biology. But I want to begin with some history, not human history as recorded by the written word, but deep history, the story of how our species colonizes much of the planet, as recorded by the migration stories that are encoded in our genes. The genetic evidence detailed by the Human Genographic Project that has sampled over 1 million participants from some 140 countries demonstrates that the first wave of humans to leave the continent of Africa occurs about 60 to 70,000 years ago. They're driven by a rapidly cooling climate at the onset of the last ice age. These humans follow the coastline through the Middle East, around the subcontinent of India, down through Southeast Asia, and eventually colonize the continent of Australia. The descendants of these intrepid humans are the modern day Aboriginal Australians, as well as the indigenous tribes that live in Papua New Guinea. So, about the same time that humans colonize Australia, we see an incredible loss of biodiversity. Large animals, particularly the large bodied mammals, are disproportionately impacted. The fossil record clearly demonstrates that some 88% of the large mammal genera is the plural for genus, 88% of these large mammal genera go extinct during this time. So planet Earth loses the giant wombat in the center here. This thing was like 10 feet long, stood over 7 feet tall, and weighed 6,000 pounds. Earth loses the short-faced kangaroo, which grew to about 10 feet tall as well and weighed over 500 pounds. In the lower center here, this one disappears. This is a carnivorous marsupial, Thlacoleo carnifex. It was a marsupial-like, lion-like creature the size of a leopard. Multiple species of massive flightless birds were lost, including the demon duck of doom, 10-foot tall, 1,100-pound carnivore. The carnivorous goanna, pictured here, a massive reptile, dwarfing modern-day Komodo dragons. These things got to be 23 feet long and weighed over 4,200 pounds. Humans arrive, and poof, these things are gone. Yes, the climate was changing, but the 1-2 punch of climate change and the invasion of this novel, highly intelligent, fire-wielding, and cooperatively hunting human organism undoubtedly radically altered these ancient Australian ecosystems. Some 50,000 years ago, a second wave of humans leaves Africa and colonizes South Central Asia in what is present-day Kazakhstan. So Africa was the birthplace of Homo sapiens, but South Central Asia was our cradle. The vast majority of non-African humans on the planet today, including myself, the Europeans, Asians, Native Americans, and all of their descendants, descend from the second wave to leave Africa. So humans colonized Europe some 40,000 years ago. We interbreed with the Neanderthals, who have been in Europe for at least 400,000 years. Today, all non-African populations carry somewhere between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA, genetic evidence for this ancient intermixing. As we saw in Australia 20,000 years prior, human colonization is followed by massive extinction of large mammals in the fossil record. We lose the Irish elk, which carried the largest antlers of any known deer to have ever lived, measuring 12 feet across from tip to tip. Here you can see an Irish elk being pursued by massive and now extinct Eurasian cave lions. We have evidence that humans were likely exploiting these dangerous lions, as archaeologists have recovered cave lion skins that have been cleaned using stone tools. Further, the precious and incredibly rich 20,000-year-old Lascaux cave paintings discovered in southwestern France clearly demonstrate that Europeans at this time lived in a world with lions, rhinoceroses, bison, hippos. These are large mammals that are long gone from the France of today. Some 25,000 years ago, Native Americans genetically diverge from their Siberian ancestors and inhabit Beringia, the Bering Land Bridge, a 600-mile wide spit of land that connected Asia and North America when sea levels were lower because water was locked up as ice during the height of the last glaciation period. These first Native Americans, they made their way down the coast and in between glaciers, and they peopled the Americas. The pre-Clovis culture occurs some 20,000 years ago. During this period, the planet loses the incredible North American Pleistocene megafauna. By 12,700 years ago, at least 90 genera of massive mammals are extinct. North America loses the woolly mammoth here on top, the mastodon, the smilodon, saber-toothed cats, the massive short-faced bear, the dire wolf, the American lion, the giant ground sloth, camels, horses, the giant armadillo. By 15,000 years ago, we have the earliest archaeological evidence for human culture in South America. Just like we see on continent after continent, human colonization co-occurs with a wave of extinction events disproportionately impacting large-bodied mammals, including the South American saber-toothed cats and the 3,800-pound Arctotherium, which translates as bear beast. So it takes humans longer to colonize the planet's islands. However, by 2,500 to 4,000 years ago, seafaring humans were first foraging and hunting on the island of Madagascar. By 2,000 years ago, the world had lost the gorilla-sized lemur. The flightless elephant birds, aptly named elephant birds, were the largest birds to have ever lived on planet Earth. They were found on the island of Madagascar. The largest species of elephant bird stood nearly 10 feet tall and weighed up to 1,000 pounds. The elephant birds are gone by 1,000 years ago. Like the dodo bird, a massive, flightless, extinct pigeon from the island of Mauritius, the elephant birds were likely naive to the danger posed to them by spear and club-wielding humans. And it's hard to blame these human explorers too much. Imagine spending months at sea on primitive watercraft to land on an island and find basketball-sized eggs. Those were probably pretty damn appealing. So, how do we define what it means to be human? We're a cosmopolitan African primate with a relatively large prefrontal cortex. Does that do it? I argue that one of the defining characteristics of humanness is our propensity to drive other species into extinction. It's kind of our thing. It's what we do. No other species in the history of life on planet Earth has such an outsized impact on ecological communities. Whatever role we played in the extinction of the Pleistocene megafauna, it pales in comparison to the rate at which we are currently driving species into extinction. Conservation biologists and geologists have now agreed that we have entered a new geologic epoch in which humans are the primary ecological and evolutionary drivers of life on planet Earth. Welcome to the age of the Anthropocene.
This is the story of how one species changed a planet. The latest chapter of our story begins in England 250 years ago. Fueled by coal, then oil, several brilliant inventions appeared. They ignited the Industrial Revolution, which spread like wildfire through Europe, North America, Japan, then elsewhere. The great railways, then cars and highways, connected people across the globe. Medical discoveries saved millions of lives. New artificial fertilizers meant we could feed more people. Population rose rapidly. But this was nothing compared with what was to come. The 1950s marked the beginning of the Great Acceleration. Globalization, marketing, tourism, and huge investments helped fuel enormous growth. People swarmed to cities, which became even more powerful engines of creativity. In a single lifetime, the well-being of millions has improved beyond measure. Health, wealth, security, longevity. Never have so many had so much. Yet 1 billion are malnourished. In a single lifetime, we have grown into a phenomenal global force. We move more sediment and rock annually than all natural processes, such as erosion and rivers. We manage 3/4 of all land outside the ice sheets. Greenhouse gas levels this high have not been seen for over 1 million years. Temperatures are increasing. We have made a hole in the ozone layer. We are losing biodiversity. Many of the world's deltas are sinking due to damming, mining, and other causes. Sea level is rising. Ocean acidification is a real threat. We are altering Earth's natural cycles. We have entered the Anthropocene. a new geological epoch dominated by humanity. This relentless pressure on our planet risks unprecedented destabilization. But our creativity, energy, and industry offer hope. We have shaped our past, we are shaping our present, we can shape our future. You and I are part of this story. We are the first generation to realize this new responsibility. As the population grows to 9 billion, we must find a safe operating space for humanity, for the sake of future generations. Welcome to the Anthropocene.
On July 16th, 1945, right next door in Alamo Gordo, New Mexico, humans detonated the first atomic bomb, leaving a stratigraphic presence of plutonium-239 in a layer in the geologic record all around the world that will be detected, if we're here to detect it, thousands of years from now. As humanity at this point in time leaves the Holocene epoch and goes hurtling into a new human-dominated epoch, the age of the Anthropocene. Following the post-World War II baby boom in the early 1950s, the Great Acceleration begins. That shows up on your assessment. The Great Acceleration is this exponential increase in humans, in the demography of humans, coupled with our ever-increasing patterns of consumption. So fertilizer at this time starts to be mass produced, which doubled the amount of reactive nitrogen in the environment. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere starts to surge. New plastics spread around the globe, and there's a rise in global commerce that carries invasive animals and plant species all around the continents. Furthermore, people are migrating from rural areas into urban centers, feeding the growth of our mega cities. The Great Acceleration. By closely examining the fossil record, paleontologists have estimated what's known as the background extinction rate. Remember, all species go extinct, and so we would expect to see regular extinction in the fossil record. However, the age of the Anthropocene is characterized by extinction rates 2 to 3 orders of magnitude greater than those background normal extinction rates. Current extinction rates today in 2020 rival those at the end of the Cretaceous period, except this extinction event is not driven by a killer asteroid. This extinction event is caused by us. Some of the casualties include the West African black rhino, declared extinct in 2008. In March 2019, you might remember, you may have seen it on the news, Sudan, the last living male northern white rhino died, leaving us with just 2 females and making the northern white rhino now functionally extinct. The last known living Baihi, or Yangtze River dolphin, died in 2002. This was a freshwater dolphin species that had lived in the Yangtze River in that watershed for 20 million years, and we drove it into extinction in a few decades. So there was an extensive expedition that surveyed up and down the Yangtze River in 2006, and it failed to find any river dolphins, and it was declared extinct. The Pyrenean ibex was super abundant in the Pyrenees Mountains in southern France during the Middle Ages, And because of those incredibly sought after horns, this thing was heavily hunted in the 19th and 20th centuries. The last one died in January 2000. The once super abundant Monte Verde golden toad, endemic to the cloud forests of Costa Rica, was last seen in May 1989. The golden toad is the poster child for the alarming worldwide decline in amphibians. Amphibians are just being decimated today. Like so many amphibians around the world, the golden toad was hit by critid fungus. This is a virulent pathogen. We first detected it in Australia, and it's been vectored around the world by human activities. This is the quagga, named because of the sound that it used to make, quagga. This was likely a subspecies of plains zebra that was hunted into extinction by the Dutch when they settled South Africa. Then we're going to move to what's called the 100 Heartbeats Club. So these are species that are literally on the knife's edge of extinction. The Amur leopard is the most critically endangered cat on the planet. There's an estimated 60 to maybe as high as 92 individuals that are hanging on the Russian-Chinese border. The smallest cetacean in the world, the vaquita, or the little sea cow, sometimes called the panda porpoise because of these dark rings found around its eye. So these guys live or lived just to the south of us in the northern Sea of Cortez. The population has just plummeted just in the past few years, may be gone already. But what's driving this, there's illegal fishermen that use gill nets. They're not after the vaquita, but they catch them inadvertently. The vaquita get hung up in the nets. They're marine mammals. They have to breathe, and so they drown. The fishermen are after a highly valuable and also endangered fish called the totoba. So this fish has a very valuable swim bladder, which is trafficked by the cartels to China. There was a last-ditch captive breeding program for the vaquita that failed in late 2017 when a female died in a sea pen designed for her. If you want to learn more about the vaquita, I encourage you to check out the new documentary, Sea of Shadows. Actually, a friend of mine from Utah State University, Ruth Mahoney, was the field producer on the film. But I have to warn you, it's heart-wrenching. The Philippine eagle is the largest eagle in the world. This species evolved to eat monkeys and has been in serious decline following the destruction of the Philippine rainforests, the rampant deforestation that has occurred in the Philippines. The Cross River western lowland gorilla is the most endangered great ape in the world. There's an estimated 200 to 300 individuals. They're scattered across 11 groups. Fortunately, they are found in rugged mountains, montane forests, and rainforests in Cameroon and Nigeria, spread across an area of some 3,000 square miles. The Cross River gorillas do live in a region that's populated by many humans who are continuously encroaching on the gorillas' territory, clearing forests for timber, and to create fields for agriculture and livestock. Poaching occurs in the forest as well, and when the population gets this small, even the loss of just a few individuals can have a huge impact. So the term biodiversity was originally coined by the beloved Harvard professor E.O. Wilson, also known lovingly by his students as Dr. Ant. Biodiversity refers to the variability, the genetic, the species, as well as the ecosystem variability that's found among living organisms. The first level of biodiversity that conservation biologists must consider is genetic diversity. Genetic diversity is ultimately what provides a species with the raw materials, the genetic raw materials upon which selection can act. The more genetic diversity that a species has, the more adaptation that is possible for the species to help it cope with an ever fluctuating environment. Maintaining genetic diversity is also in our best interest, particularly with respect to our agriculture. So the only banana that you're probably familiar with is the ubiquitous, found everywhere Cavendish variety. This large, sweet, yellow banana has been artificially selected to provide long shelf life as it's packed all around the world. However, in the photos, these are wild varieties of wild bananas. By preserving their habitats, what we're doing is we're conserving a genetic repository that we can use in the future, a repository of alleles that can help us fend off new emergent diseases like Panama disease or banana wilt. It's a very worrisome new fungus that is destroying banana plantations, all growing that Cavendish cultivar. It's destroying bananas across the tropics and is likely to drive the price of bananas up substantially in the coming years. One of the problems with industrialized agriculture in our capitalistic economies is that large multinational corporations own the patents on all of the seed that they then annually sell to farmers. In an attempt to maximize profits, these massive mechanized farms in the Midwestern United States have become monocultures, all growing, for example, Monsanto's number 2 corn. The problem with monocultures is that when a newly emergent pathogen strikes, like banana wilt, they don't just wipe out a few fields. These new pathogens, newly emergent pathogens, could destroy the 12 million acres of corn across the entire state of Iowa. And then suddenly, our land of plenty could be a castle made of sand. The famous evolutionary biologist J.B.S. Haldane once joked, God must have an inordinate fondness for beetles. So while there are about 4,000 species of mammals on the planet, there are over 350,000 species of beetles. Beetles account for 25% of the known life forms on this planet. Beetles were here long before us, and they will surely be here long after we're gone. So in thinking about species diversity, the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, defines an endangered species as one that has a high probability of becoming extinct in all or much of its range now or in the near future. Whereas a threatened species is one that is likely to become endangered on a temporal scale of the next few years or decades. So the IUCN is the International Authority on the Conservation of Biodiversity. leading scientists in their fields work cooperatively across countries, across universities to compile the best available information in what are called the IUCN Red List reports. Like this one you see before you that's focused on the conservation of bony shore fishes in the Caribbean. Data from the IUCN estimates that currently 12% of known bird species and 1 out of 5 mammals are threatened or endangered. This striking little scarlet bird was one of my favorites to sit and watch when I lived on the island of Maui. So this is the I'iwi. It's a Hawaiian honey creeper that's evolved to sip nectar out of flowers with that long downturned bill. The I'iwi lives at high altitudes on the slopes of the side of the volcano Haleakala. Unfortunately, avian malaria that's carried by mosquitoes, mosquitoes that were inadvertently introduced by Europeans when they first visited the Hawaiian Islands. Prior to European contact, Hawaii didn't have mosquitoes. It's truly paradise. Anyways, the Europeans bring the mosquito brings avian malaria, and it's wiped out a lot of the lowland birds in the Hawaiian Islands. The problem is the climate is rapidly warming, and every year the range of that mosquito expands to higher and higher altitudes, shrinking the EEV's range. The third level of biodiversity that we're going to talk about today is ecosystem diversity. So this is one of the systems that you just have to see with your own eyes. These are some of the last old growth coastal redwoods left in the state of California. The redwoods are the tallest trees in the world. These giants once stretched over 2 million acres along the entire coast of northern and central California. Their former range is denoted by dark green on this map. Today, only 5% of that original old growth forest remains in those little pockets of orange that you see. The reason why that 5% remains is because of the Endangered Species Act, a piece of legislation that was passed in 1973. So these old growth, the last of the old growth redwoods, had to be saved if we were going to prevent the extinction of the northern spotted owl. So the northern spotted owl was listed as endangered in 1990. I have a close connection to the species. So my very first wildlife job was in 1999 when I interned with the Student Conservation Association. So we backpacked all over the Sierra Nevada mountains looking for spotted owl nests. To locate these nests, we would carry live mice in Tupperware, and whenever we found an owl, you would take a mouse and you would put it on a stick and then hold the stick up and go fishing for owls. If it was a female with a nest, she would swoop down, grab the mouse, and then make a beeline for her nest. When we found nests, we would mark them and report it to rangers, and then logging was not permitted within a buffer zone around those nests. Further, one of my graduate committee members, the late Dr. Jack Ward Thomas, was the chief of the United States Forest Service. He oversaw the implementation of the Northwest Forest Plan in 1994. This was a very controversial plan, part of what have now been named the Spotted Owl Wars. But it was the Northwest Forest Plan that likely saved the spotted owl and those old growth redwood forests upon which the owl depends. But It also caused the loss of some 20,000 logging jobs. So this is a really important point. Conservation decisions are not easy. Conservation decisions often have very real world consequences that are felt by real people just like you and I. Conservation biologists like myself would like to see this species listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act. Although there are an estimated 22 to 31,000 polar bears remaining on the planet, 4 of the world's 19 populations, those at the southern edge of the species range, are precipitously declining. As the climate rapidly warms, sea ice, the pack ice, is forming later and later in the fall and breaking up earlier and earlier in the spring. The polar bear is highly dependent upon this sea ice because it's how they get to and hunt ringed seals. So the demographic models suggest a 30% decline in the global population of polar bears by just 2050. Further, by listing the polar bear under the ESA, it would finally provide some legislative authority to finally begin limiting greenhouse gas emissions and slowing the changing climate. So the current global loss of biodiversity can be attributed to 4 major threats. The first is the conversion of wildland habitats into human-dominated environments. So deforestation for wood products or to cultivate soybeans or raise livestock. The conversion of grasslands into agriculture in the Midwestern United States, the transformation of the Sonoran Desert into the suburban sprawl within which I now record this. So please pause the lecture now and check out the first short video that's posted below in Canvas on deforestation. Thanks, and I'll see you in a minute. The second driver is the introduction of invasive species. So as humans have colonized the planet, we have purposefully and also unintentionally spread communities of non-native plants and animals who can wreak havoc on the native animals in the systems to which they're introduced. So please pause the lecture now and check out the second short video on the introduction of the brown tree snake to the island of Guam. Carefully listen when you watch that video to the densities of snakes that are on that island. It's mind-blowing. And the resultant loss of bird communities following the introduction of this non-native introduced species. So over-harvesting occurs when humans simply take too many of a wild species, or we choose to harvest a species like the orange ruffy that has a very slow life tempo and is incapable of replenishing itself following harvest. So as you watch the third video on the bush meat trade in the Congo, be cautious not to judge. It's easy for you and I to head to the supermarket and find our animal protein neatly packaged under cellophane. Perhaps the scariest of all of the drivers of the loss of biological diversity is the rapidly changing climate. So the purple trees that you see in the photograph here are trees that were killed last year by a bark beetle. The trees that you see that are bright red are trees that are currently dying They're starving to death, and they're currently infested with the bark beetle. So bark beetles are affecting coniferous forests around the world, spruce forests, pine forests. Um, as the climate rapidly warms, these beetles, which have always lived in these forests, are now able to pull off multiple reproductive cycles during the expanded growing season. So in this next video, you're about to watch foresters in California warning of the dire fire danger that is caused by the mountain pine bark beetle. The video footage was taken before the devastating Camp Fire, which destroyed the town of Paradise. If you remember way back at the beginning of this course, I began it with my hero, Dr. Jane Goodall. I'd like to come full circle. So, no doubt about it, your generation is facing environmental challenges that you didn't create, but you're going to have to reckon with. That said, I don't want you to leave Bio 182 in a state of despair, because there is hope. In the words of Jane, I believe the only hope for mankind lies in the hands of our young people. I believe that too. It's why I do what I do. So I thank you for taking this course, and I look forward to hearing from you in your future as each of you goes out and becomes the change that we wish to see in the world. Thank you.